Evolution is a funny concept, isn't it? I mean, we as a species evolved from a combination of sharks and centipedes. Oh yeah, I figured it out. But it's also funny how ideas themselves can evolve and change over time. Like, did you know that Vermont used to be its own country? If they simply stayed the course, they would be the only global superpower right now.
Filmmaking is interesting since it's not really single ideas, more so a culmination of countless ones. No one just sits down and thinks of every single aspect of a movie in one go. But there's tons of examples of movie ideas being reused or evolving in some way. Like, for example, an idea Steven Spielberg had for a film about a group of little aliens attacking a farm was repurposed and split into two different films, E.T. and Gremlins. But maybe the most infamous example of a movie idea evolving involves these shaggy-looking fellas. John Carpenter and Dan O'Bannon were both attending film school at USC, where they began working on a short film together. They wrote the script together under the title The Electric Dutchman, which was later reworked to Dark Star. Carpenter primarily wrote the overall story, while O'Bannon worked on the original ideas and the comedy. Carpenter stepped in as director, while O'Bannon was in charge of the special effects. He also starred in the film as one of the leads, Sergeant Pinback. The plot is about a 20-year colonizing scout mission aboard the ship Dark Star, destroying unstable planets deemed unsuitable for colonization using sentient nuclear bombs.
Sergeant Pinback calling bomb number 19. Do you read me, bomb?
Bomb number 19 to Sergeant Pinback. I read you. Continue.
However, on their way towards a potentially unstable planet, they get caught in an electromagnetic storm which causes most of their equipment to malfunction, including the bomb activation system, causing the bomb to repeatedly attempt to set itself off several times. The crew has a captured alien aboard, which Pinback asks to keep as a ship mascot. But while trying to feed it, it escapes, causing some wacky hijinks throughout the ship as it runs rampant. The film ends with the ship's lead, Lieutenant Doolittle, trying to reason with the bomb who's attempting to set itself off. The film was completed in 1972 on an initial budget of $1,000 and at a runtime of about 45 minutes. However, this proved to be an issue, as they were told the film was too long for film festivals, but too short for a theatrical release. So they had to look for investors for additional funding to help get the film to feature length. Eventually it was shopped around, with producer Jonathan Kaplan stepping in to provide an additional $10,000, and with the support of others, the budget was scaled up to $60,000. The film was released in March 1974, and while it received generally positive reception from critics and festival audiences, it got little attention during its wider theatrical run, with Carpenter and O'Bannon lamenting that there were multiple near-empty theaters.
Instead of the most impressive student film ever made, we had the least impressive professional film ever made.
Although over the years it received a strong cult following when it made its way to home video. I've seen it a couple times, and outside of being a sort of history piece, there isn't much to see. It has its moments, but you can absolutely see where the reshoots come in, because despite being around 80 minutes or so, there are scenes that are padded to hell. I feel like if it had a bigger budget and another rewrite or two, it would be a pretty solid film. Carpenter continued directing, with only 4 years later helming probably his most famous film, Halloween. O'Bannon was clearly the concept person during the creative process on Dark Star and felt that some of the ideas had more potential than what was shown in the film, especially the alien segment. O'Bannon said that despite the scene intending to be comedic, none of the audiences laughed. I wonder why. He wanted to flesh out the idea of an alien stalking people on a ship, since he didn't want the concept to be wasted on Dark Star. But he felt that there was a much better angle to approach it than comedically, saying, "If I can't make them laugh, maybe I'll make them scream." He also said he was never satisfied with the design from Dark Star and left him wanting to show a more realistic alien. Looks fine to me.
A lot of things bothered me about Dark Star. We had an alien in it, which was a beach ball. I went away from Dark Star really wanting to do an alien that looked real. A couple of years down the line, I decided to do Dark Star as a horror movie instead of a comedy.
He later got to work on a feature-length script based on this idea, starting an initial draft of about 29 pages or so. Around this time, director Alejandro Jodorowsky had seen Dark Star and wanted to hire O'Bannon to do the special effects for his adaptation of Dune. I got a whole video on that topic right here, so why don't you go check that bad boy out. However, after working about 6 months on Dune, the project unfortunately fell through, and O'Bannon found himself homeless, so he decided to dust off the early treatment so he could shop it around to potential buyers.
See, it's that easy. If you're broke and homeless, just write yourself a screenplay. I don't think I've ever seen a starving artist unsuccessfully shove a screenplay down someone else's throat.
I think speaking from a marketing perspective, it was a good idea for O'Bannon to make it a horror script. The idea translates over much better because you'll essentially have the structure of a slasher film. Horror and comedy as genres have much more bleed over than you realize. If you boil their goals down to a basic level, you're building to some sort of payoff. Whether this be a punchline or to scare your audience. You're essentially tapping into primal reactions from the audience, whether it be laughter or fear. It's why you see so many comedians turned horror directors. When finishing the script for Alien, his time working on Dune proved to be valuable since he was enthralled with H.R. Giger's work, who had been doing conceptual art for the film. This painting in particular stuck with him, with O'Bannon saying he essentially wrote the rest of the script about Giger's monster. With help from screenwriter Ronald Shusett and changing the title from Star Beast to Alien due to its double meaning as both a noun and adjective, O'Bannon was on the verge of striking a deal with Roger Corman's company to sell the script to them. However, through a friend, he was able to strike a deal with Brandywine, who had ties with 20th Century Fox since Fox was looking for another sci-fi property after the success of Star Wars. Production started in late 1977, and filming began in July of '78 with Ridley Scott, off the moderate success of his first film The Duelists, in the director's chair. Although O'Bannon was hoping to direct the film himself, the executives wanted to treat it like a serious film and had concerns of it coming off as a B-movie.
Dark Star's Kino, what are they talking about?
Alien was released in the summer of 1979 and was an enormous success, raking in $184.7 million on an $11 million budget, and went on to win an Oscar for Best Visual Effects. I had the chance to watch it in a theater a few months ago, and despite having already seen it numerous times, it's still effectively scary. It's hard to think of another film that matches the suspense and atmosphere it has. O'Bannon maintained a steady career throughout the 80s, writing films like Invaders from Mars, Total Recall, and writing and directing Return of the Living Dead. He continued to occasionally work in the industry before passing in 2009. Carpenter went on to have an immensely successful directing career, with The Thing in 1982 possibly considered his best work. The film shares narrative similarities with Alien, with an alien stalking a crew who are confined by outside elements, except instead of space, they're in the Arctic. I love both movies, but of the two, I actually prefer The Thing. It's my favorite horror film of all time. So what can we learn from this? Well, I think it's an exercise in showing that even though an idea has been used once, and even in a completely different context, it can still prove to be effective in another. It's kind of like how Edgar Wright said he kicked himself by using the timing the footage to music gimmick in Mint Royale's music video for Blue Song, and considered not making Baby Driver, but ended up doing it anyway. I don't think Dark Star works entirely outside of a curiosity piece, like I said, especially the alien sequence. But it shows that even though it was used here and met with crickets, only a few years later it was used in one of the best films ever made.
Wow, that's a pretty inspirational story when you step back. I'm sure there's a lot of aspiring filmmakers out there, so it seems pretty clear that all you need to do is get you and your hippie friends together to make a short film, beg for more money to extend it to feature length, put it in theaters and get a so-so reception, befriend a crazy Chilean man who convinces you to sell your stuff and move to Paris, become broke and homeless, and write screenplays to sell to people in the hopes that you'll make enough money to stay alive. If that seems complicated to you, then the door's that way. I personally think that there's tons of movies out there that, while not being the best, have some ideas that could be made into something fantastic. Like rooftop drug buys in The Room? Tons of potential there.